So, my first question, sir. Today again, U.S. President Trump has issued a statement saying that he is going to raise tariffs again next 24 hours. So, will the U.S. raise tariffs on India beyond this current 25% level plus penalty?
Yes, the president has made that statement. And the question you have to ask is, what's the logic behind that statement as to you keep on increasing tariff? But one thing we know is he is using tariff as a negotiation ploy. He uses tariff to basically have a very coercive process dealing with country. And I think that is being applied to India at this stage. And so we'll have to wait and watch as to what he comes back after he made the statement that there'll be additional tariff on India within 24 hours.
But in India, everyone have this question in mind. Why now? Why he started raising the issue of Russian oil now? Yesterday, we have seen the statement of the Minister of External Affairs saying that the US and the EU both have been purchasing goods from the Russia. Then why they are targeting only India? So why now? What is the trigger point?
Well, if you look at during his campaign, he said he can stop the Russian-Ukraine war in 24 hours, and that doesn't seem to work. His threat to Putin has not worked. So the whole strategy is to basically strangle him on his cash coming in. And India is a buyer of Russian oil. India spent roughly $50 billion plus last year buying Russian oil. But then India is also not the only country buying. You look at China, which buys much higher number. And then you look at EU, they have procured over 70 plus billion dollars of LNG from Russia last year. So I think when you look at the cash flow coming in is much bigger from China and EU than India. But I guess India becomes a soft target and he's just trying to leverage that.
Does Trump's this tirade against India have more to do with his ego than with India's purchase of Russian oil? Because yesterday I've spoken with a few officials. They kept raising the issue of why India not accepting this fact that Trump has mediated during this Operation Sindoor. So, do you think this is more about the ego?
Well, you have to understand he desires a Nobel Prize, and Pakistan played its cards right by saying that Trump intervened and stopped the war, and we are nominating him for a Nobel Peace Prize. Whereas India has been saying that the president did not intervene, and so that basically implies that he is lying, and that is also hurting his ego itself. So I think that's where I would say that India could have played his card a little differently with Trump and placated him rather than denying whatever he's saying on India-Pakistan.
Okay, so now if US imposed massive tariff level to pacify his anger somehow, what can India offer to appease Trump and conclude somehow trade deal?
Well, the government of India is in a very difficult position. Basically, as a democracy, you cannot go out and start appeasing nations because then you have opposition which is going no leeway to the prime minister to handle foreign policy. I mean, say Trump made a statement that Russian and the Indian economy is dead. And Rahul Gandhi, as the leader of the opposition, played on that and said, hey, listen, I've been saying all along, the economy is dead. So I think the opposition has to also understand and support the government to ensure that there is a smooth relationship with the United States and India, especially on the trade side, because once you start putting tariffs, it does have an impact on India's export. It has an impact on unemployment. It has an impact on basically the cash foreign exchange reserves also. So I think it's important that the opposition does not play this as a political game itself, but they need to basically position itself what's good for the nation and support the prime minister from that perspective.
And if US targets India's service exports, should India retaliate?
See, India does not have the same leverage on US as China has. China basically has a stronghold on the critical mineral, and they have said that if they stop that supply, then a substantial impact on U.S. defense sector, substantial impact on the chip manufacturing, a substantial impact in other critical technologies also. India does not have that leverage. And so the question you have to ask is what area and what capacity India can basically put that leverage on US. And I would say at this stage, it is difficult because in every aspect, it does impact India because you have a country with almost $200 billion trade, and you have a country whose companies are invested in India, creating millions of jobs, and in the long term, the capital we have to leverage from the U.S. So I think from every aspect, we have to find a better way to deal with the situation than thinking of retaliating. It's good for the ego that we will retaliate, but I think from every aspect, we need to find a alternative rather than just saying, hey, we will retaliate.
Uh, Several Indian analysts argue that India should brace for the worst, noting that if a less powerful India could stand up to the US during 1998 sanctions, it should be able to do so now. What are your thoughts on this stance?
Well, India is a sovereign country. It's a proud country. It has the intellectual depth, which is better than most of the nation itself. So the question you have to ask is, can India survive the high tariff from the US? The answer is yes, absolutely. I think what India has to do is instead of having export focus on the US, divert that. It'll take some time and there'll be some challenges. But does India have the capacity to deal with that? Absolutely. I think the country has gone through a lot of challenges, and so I don't think that is the issue here. I think India can manage and move on. The question we have to ask is do we really can we salvage this situation and find a way to move forward rather than trying to basically get into a contest with the president?
And do you think Indian perspectives are not being discussed in Washington, D.C.? Has something gone wrong with Indian diplomacy?
Well, nothing has gone wrong with the Indian diplomacy. You have to understand that the whole game of trying to build policies in Washington, D.C. has changed. The whole game of trying to have a consultative process has changed in Washington, D.C. Today, every decision, almost every decision, is made by the president. So I think in the case of India, you had the secretary, commerce secretary, and the USTR chief basically a few weeks ago present a recommendation to the president on a trade deal with India. And that was not accepted by the president. He wanted some kind of highlines in every aspect when he announces that deal. And so he was looking for those basically headlines. And since he was not getting it, it just fell in this direction. So I think the whole game of diplomacy has changed and nothing to do with the failure of Indian diplomacy. Every country in Washington, D.C., the diplomats are struggling with this scenario.
And in this scenario, do you think that this kind of situation will somehow impact the larger goal of India in the Indo-Pacific, the policy related to Indo-Pacific, the Quad? So, do you think that this may go beyond this trade thing?
I don't think so. And I'll tell you why. Because the relationship between India and the US has been moving in the positive direction for the last 25 years. Let's take the defense side. Defense is not a transactional relationship, it's a very structured relationship where you have agreements signed between the two countries in every aspect. There are more joint military exercises taking place between India and the US than any other country. So I think to derail that, it'll take some time. You look at basically on the economic side, you have over 2,000 companies in India from the US side. They're doing massive amount of R&D. They're using IT services. They're doing manufacturing. And for them, India becomes a de-risk to the China scenario also. Yes, the tariff will have an impact on components being made and being brought to the US, but then US defense companies are also manufacturing some critical items for their defense products in the US. For example, Skorsky helicopter, the cabins which the president flies are made in Hyderabad. So I think then you have 5+ million Indian Americans who are basically rooting for a strong relationship between two countries. So I think while, yes, you have a president who is basically using social media to threaten India from tariff perspective, but overall, the relationship on the ground level is very stable, very positive, and we feel that that momentum is not slowing down.
So, my last question is going forward, do you think that this kind of um statements, accusation, and all things will stop in near future? And what should India do now?
Well, it's the issue is not just India, it's rest of the world. Because if you look at, Brazil has been threatened. You look at BRIC nations have been threatened. Russia is being threatened. Europe has been threatened. Canada has been threatened. You look at Mexico has gone through the same thing. So what you have is basically the style from Washington D.C. has changed. And the question really becomes is how do you handle basically a scenario where the old regime of making decision has shifted now and moved on to social media pronouncements. And I think every country has to adjust. And what we are seeing is as time goes by, the traffic to Washington, D.C., from a trade perspective, will start slowing down and regional trade blocks will come up because, yes, you want business, but at the same time, you want business with some honor and respect. And if that is not there, then countries and companies will move in different direction.